What's up, YouTube? Today we're working on a 07 Jeep Commander, doing 2 lower ball joints and an inner tie rod as requested by the customer. Let's start by taking off these wheels. Let's get to it. All right, wheels off. We're gonna be working on that lower ball joint first. We want to take everything off. We want the steering knuckle out of the way. We're gonna take this nut off the ball joint, take the outer tire end, rod end off, get our brakes taken apart, and axle nut loose. All right, guys, we used a 21mm to take off the bottom ball joint nut, tie rod nut, and upper ball joint. What you want to do to take that tie rod off is just hit it right here with a hammer. That'll get it loose and you can pull it out. We used a 36mm on the axle nut, then an air chisel right on this dot to press the axle back. 21mm on the back of the mounting bracket, 14mm on these nuts on the brake. Took everything apart. Now we're gonna hammer on the right here and on the lower ball joint to get the whole spindle loose and take that out of the way so we can access our lower ball joint. All right, so I tapped it with a hammer right here and it didn't want to come off. I started tapping the lower ball joint on the spindle right here, and then they both came free. Now I can take that bottom nut all the way off. I left it on there to catch the spindle so it didn't fall to the ground. All right, I got the wheel speed sensor disconnected right here so the steering knuckle can come off. I wire wheeled the lower ball joint so you guys could see there's these 2 little tabs on the left and right side of that. If it still has those tabs, it's original. And I'm going to use my air chisel with a flat tip and just kind of bend those inward and then start removing the ball joint. Okay, guys, just press that ball joint out. Usually you can just hammer them out. This one's pretty stiff in there. I'm gonna have to press it. So I had to get this axle out of the way. I was gonna take this loose, 24mm, 22 on the other side, but it's seized inside the inner metal sleeve. It's not coming out without torching, and I don't want to ruin that bushing. It's not part of the job. So right where that axle goes in, right on the lip of it, took a long bar and a hammer, gave it a few love taps, and it popped out of there. And then the axle can swing out of the way to get your press tool straight above it. All right, we're all set up. I'm just gonna press straight down on this. I might have to reset with some sort of adapter to press down if it spins around on this little ball part. But I'm gonna tighten it down and see if it pops out. All right, that worked. Ball joint popped right out. Cleaned up the hole and gave it a little grease. Got my cones all set up. Now this is at a little bit of angle because it rises. So I'm gonna watch this carefully and make sure it presses in straight as I'm tightening the C-clamp to press it in. All right, that ball joint pressed in nice and straight. Didn't have to reposition any of my cones or anything. You want to feel up underneath of there where it's seated. Make sure you can't get your fingernail up underneath of there. Put the grease fitting on, 8mm. Now, we're gonna pop the snap ring on top, and that's it for the lower ball joint. We're gonna do the inner tie rod and then throw the steering knuckle all back together, reverse order. All right, we got that snap ring on. I took this clip off the inner boot. Got this nut loose so the tie rod spins. He only wanted an inner tie rod, so we're gonna measure it out, count the turns off. If the inner tie rods are the same length, then we could just count the turns back on to keep it fairly aligned. He's gonna get alignment after this. So that's loose. It's easier to loosen up with the steering knuckle on. It was a 15/16 wrench on the nut and a 1-inch to hold down the tie rod on the flat spots to break this free. Spins nice and easy now. We're gonna cut off the retaining ring on the inner tie rod boot and take this outer tie rod off, and then take that boot off. All right, I zipped that nut off, 24 millimeter, 15/16. One of them two sizes will work. Grab that spring clip off of there and snag that out of there. Just grabbed it by the edge and pulled it with my side snips. It popped off. So now we're gonna give this a tug. All right, it doesn't want to come off of there easily, so I'm gonna have to put the phone down. But we're gonna take that off. All right, we got the boot off and turn the steering wheel all the way to the left. This inner tie rod is round, all the way around. You can't put a wrench on it. You need a specialty tool that looks like this. It's got 3 set screws in there. The circle part of the tie rod goes in there, then you tighten the set screws. Then you could turn it with this in here. You might be able to get it off with a pipe wrench, because it is giving us a lot of room down here. Or if you got some jumbo vice grips like these bad boys, you should be able to take it off with any of them methods. All right, we've compared our 2 inner tie rods. They are the same length, so we're just gonna spin that outer tie rod on those 20 turns it took to spin off. And that should put us in the same spot for alignment. Oh, where it threads in here, put a little thread locker on there. This one actually has flat spots on it. The replacement looks like it's about 1.5 inch. Use a big crescent to tighten it up. No special tools on this one. So we're gonna tighten that down real good. Put the boot back on. It came with a zip tie to put up in here to keep the inner side of the boot down. We'll put that boot back on, and then put the outer tie rod back on 20 spins, and then tighten this lock nut up to it. All right, I tightened down the inner tie rod, had that Loctite on the threads, put the boot back on, put the zip tie on, tightened it in the right spot that was provided, put the clip back on, spun that outer tie rod back on 20 turns, tighten the lock nut. Now we're gonna throw everything back together, reverse order, grease up the new ball joint, and should be good to go. Thanks for watching.